Hello and welcome to Storytelling. What could she possibly have done to me? What could she possibly have done to our family? When I awoke the following morning in a haze of a hangover, those were the first thoughts that came to my mind. Up until last night, I believed that my wife, Susan Fremont, was a loving wife and my true love. My name is Jonathan Fremont, and I lived in the United States. It appears that she is a loving wife, at least in practice, but only with the person she is interested in. On the other hand, it is not me. She has insisted that she has been unfaithful to me for approximately a year now, and she wants me to acknowledge this fact. It's not going to happen, that's for sure. I struggled to keep my anger under control and went back over what she had said the previous evening. Not only did she love him, but she also loved me. In spite of the fact that I would have no say in the matter, she was going to spend more time with him, even overnight. It was stated by her that he is a divorced attorney, and that she was merely assisting him. It was her assertion that he was her divorce attorney in the event that I did not play ball with her. Having seen a sufficient number of courtroom dramas on television, I am aware that this constitutes a significant conflict of interest and would result in his disbarment. I cracked a grin. After that, the smile vanished in the same instant that it had just appeared. Not only did I not know who the guy was, but I also knew that anything other than torturing Susan would not be able to coerce her into divulging the information. The idea of torturing the cheating 304 was something that I briefly entertained, but then I thought about my children and their mother once more. That would be unacceptable to me. I went back and looked over everything I knew about the situation once more. Indeed, if I did not comply with her regulations, I was going to pay for her and her lover boy to live together on my dime. I was going to do this. It's a waste? A friend of mine who had been through a divorce shared with us, while we were out at the bar, how he had managed to get through the breakup of his marriage. As a result of him removing everything from his accounts and opening new ones, his cheating wife was left with no money to hire an attorney. The fact that she had managed to convince someone to take the case on a pro bono basis was not a smart move on her part. She suffered a significant defeat at the hands of my friend Shark. Since this is a no-fault state, she was awarded half of the property, but she did not receive any alimony payments. It was primarily due to the fact that he did not have any children. Yes, I am. At the very least, this indicates that I would be required to make payments toward child support. After all, I was under the impression that she was not going to bring him to the house, which meant that she was going to go to his location. However, I made the decision to check something, and I called my husband's parents. "What's going on, Jonathan? Where are you? You wanted to talk to the children, didn't you?" "Sweet lady," my mother-in-law inquired about it. I was curious as to whether or not she was aware that her daughter was a filthy 304. Not likely at all. Well, not much to report. What I was curious about, however, was something else. I was wondering how many days out of the week you typically watch the Rugrats. I inquired about it. 3 or 4 times a week, usually from 8 to 5, while Susan volunteers at the homeless shelter and food bank, she responded in response. Specifically, Susan was deceiving her own parents. "Thank you very much, Mom," I said. I was just curious about it so that I could surprise her the following week. "I beg you, don't tell her, all right? Don't be concerned, my dear." She chuckled and said, "Mom is the word." "Thank you very much, Mom. After that, I'll get back to you." After saying my goodbyes, I ended the call. The next thing I did was look in the mirror. This was not going to happen to me. On the other hand, Christopher Maloney had less hair than I did. Despite the fact that it had begun to decrease, it was not yet too severe. I shaved my head and then combed my hair, and to my surprise, I had more than just the detective stabler on New York City Police. After this, the beer gut would have to be removed. In spite of the fact that she said that to me the night before in an attempt to hurt me, she was wrong about that. In what way could I have allowed myself to be so careless? Putting in extra hours for a total of 160 hours per week in order to bring home the bacon for my wonderful children and my unfaithful wife. The wife was no longer as much of a love to me as the children were. To be honest, she would have me believe that I was more vulnerable than I actually was. My first order of business was to call and cancel all of our joint credit cards. I then placed an order for new credit cards that are only in my name. Following that, I called the manager of my branch and instructed him to transfer all of the money from our joint checking and savings account into a checking account that was solely in my name. Moreover, I stopped the automatic payments of my bills. To put it simply, ladies and gentlemen, it is known as self-defense. Due to the fact that my wife held me in such low regard and displayed such a high level of disrespect, she would lie through her teeth about how defenseless I was against her divorce argument. It was her declaration of war. It was her gaffe. On the other hand, her scumbag lawyer friend had given her some instructions on what to say. Similar to law enforcement officers, attorneys will resort to intimidating tactics in order to prevent the general public from retaliating. When the police officers do it, they do it because they are aware that you would have a valid complaint against them, and the attorneys do it so that they can get a settlement outside of court. Yes, they both failed to recognize my potential. Despite the fact that I make my living as a diesel mechanic, that does not make me an idiot. I could have been a police officer or a private investigator if I had spent 4 years in the Army Criminal Investigation Division. However, I really enjoyed working on engines, and diesel engines were my area of expertise. I was making a respectable amount of money and a significant amount of overtime at time and a half, even though I was working as a shade tree mechanic even before I became certified as a diesel mechanic. In order to clear my head, I decided to go for a jog while wearing sweatpants. In addition to that, I did it in order to actually get some exercise and to make an effort to get rid of this beer gut situation. I decided to call my boss after I had finished my jog and let him know that I was going to have to take a couple of weeks off from work in order to deal with a family emergency. His approval was given for that, and after that, it was time for me to make some adjustments to my strategy. From the beginning, I was aware that it was going to be a violent event and that there would be a significant amount of blood. After all the dust had settled, there was a good chance that I would end up in jail. Hell, that was a possibility. Without a doubt, I wanted to steer clear of that. Having worked in CID, I was aware that there were ways to accomplish this, but I also knew that it would be difficult. It had come to the time to go shopping. I took a shower, changed into clean clothes, and then went out and about. The arrival of winter prompted me to acquire a pair of gloves that were pliable and soft, a black turtleneck, and a ski mask that did not have a mouth hole. Additionally, I purchased a pair of Oakley sunglasses that had a matte grey finish on the front and frames that were matte black. Can't help but adore Walmart. There was no doubt in my mind that I was going to have a great time once I discovered who the real jerk was. Following that, I went to the local spy shop and purchased a GPS system that had batteries that had an extended lifespan as well as some voice-activated recorders. Despite my deliberations, cameras are not going to be required at this time. In addition, I purchased a pair of steel-toed work boots in a matte black color and a gym bag to carry my newly acquired clothing. My old work boots were pretty worn out, so that wasn't too much of a stretch for me to do anyway. On the other hand, that is not a problem, the new boots would serve as replacements for the old ones. In my search for a sporting goods store, I came across one and purchased a large gym bag as well as an aluminum baseball bat. In addition, I made the decision to purchase a sports girdle for my stomach just in case. My gut told me that I did not want the guy to be able to identify me, and I was absolutely right about that. It was imperative that I paid for everything with cash. In order to avoid leaving a paper trail from a credit card that could be followed back to me, I did not want to get involved. After that, the challenging part began. I had to play the role of the whipped husband whenever my cheating witch of a wife returned home, specifically whenever she made the decision to return home. It goes without saying that I would not immediately give in. Susan is familiar with me, and she is aware of how stubborn I can be. I stayed out until what would have been the time to leave, which was the end of the day. I did not want the witch to believe that anything was going on just yet. When I went inside the house, she wasn't even there yet. I was surprised. Now, forget about it. When I attempted to call her mobile phone, I discovered that it was muted and went straight to voicemail. The message that I left for her stated that it was an urgent matter and that she needed to call me as soon as she was able to do so. The time and date were mentioned, and I informed her that she needed to call me as soon as possible. It was time to play a little bit of a joke on her consciousness. Although she called 2 hours later, the children were still at their grandparents' house when she arrived. Her voice sounded as though she was out of breath. "Jonathan, what's going on?" The tone of her question was one of concern. I made the decision to sound a little heartbroken. "You should go home, Susan. It's all about the children." I cried out a little bit for effect, and then I hung up the phone. "Please just come straight home." When I called Susan, she arrived at my house immediately and rushed into the room from the garage. She arrived less than 10 minutes after I had called her. She noticed how pale I appeared to be. "What all is going on, sweetheart?" Her eyes were filled with fear as she asked, "Where are the children right now? What do you care?" It was a snap. You were too busy with your lover to worry that your children could have been hurt or dying. Both my eyes and my voice were filled with hatred, and my voice was full of venom. Oh, the marriage was over, but before it was all over, I was going to screw with her head in a way that was absolutely insane. "Sue, it's been 2 hours. After I had returned home from work and called you, your phone was turned off for a period of 2 hours. Suppose the children had been injured in some way. And then what? Would you say that he is significantly more important to you than your own children?" Susan fell to the couch in the living room and cradled her face in her hands as she collapsed for the first time. The tears that she shed were pitiful. "How would you feel if I had been the one to be murdered instead of the children? Would you be as concerned about it, Susan?" I inquired with a more subdued tone of voice. "Would you care at all or just call your parents to tell them to keep the kids longer so you could have even more time with your boy toy?" She looked up at me, looking defiant despite the fact that her eyes were red from crying. "Jonathan, that is not how things are done." She cried out in protest, "You know it's not like that. I do not believe that you would treat me in such a manner. Using your own children as weapons against me is something I simply cannot believe you would do." My head shook slowly as I did so. "The answer is no, Susan. The only thing I wanted to do was let you know what might have occurred, which is that you would have been 2 hours late for something significant and would have been required to explain to everyone why you were 2 hours late. Would you rather tell the truth or tell a lie? It was stated that you desired to conceal this information from our families. Considering that your mobile phone is turned off, what are we supposed to do during that time? What would you do if your parents suffered a heart attack and your children were trying to bring you to them? So, Susan, what are you going to do?" She shrieked, her face turning red with unbridled rage, and what appeared to be just a twinge of guilt. "I can't believe you would do this to me," she said. That sense of guilt was the primary impetus behind her rage. "I didn't do this to you, Susan. You did it to yourself when you took up with your little boyfriend." "I miss my wife, and the kids miss their mommy," I said, still keeping my voice low and even. "They love their grandparents, but they love you more." That caused her to pale a bit. She knew deep down that I was right, but her stubborn pride would no more allow her to admit it than it would allow her to ever admit I was right about something. "Well, since they're fine, I'm going back after I shower," she sneered at me. "Just remember, you try to divorce me, I will leave you ruined and broken." There is a God, I thought as she wandered back towards our bedroom to shower in the master bath. I acted quickly, grabbing the GPS and one of the voice-activated recorders, and heading out to her car. I planted the VA recorder under her seat and the GPS under the passenger seat. I had the receivers for both on me so I could know where she went and what she was saying, either on the phone or talking to herself. The signal range was a good 10 miles, she would have to be all the way on the other side for me to lose the signal. And from when she called until she showed up, he did not live all the way on the other side of town. Oh, dip, fucker's day of reckoning was coming, and it was coming very soon. Once the devices were planted and my receivers were tested, I pocketed the voice receiver and placed the GPS receiver in my Ford F-250 diesel. I love that old truck. I was inside, sitting with my head in my hands, as Susan came out dressed to kill. I looked up at her. Susan, I'm begging you, please don't do this to me, don't do this to your family, I pleaded. Her expression softened. I'm sorry that you can't understand, honey. I really do love you, but he needs me, she said, giving me an apologetic smile. No, Susan, if you were sorry, you wouldn't go. You would still be a faithful wife instead of sleeping with a man who is not your husband, I said, giving it to her straight. You have to understand, honey, I have to do this, he needs me, she pleaded again. Your family needs you, Susan, I emphasized family to her. Or do you no longer care about me and our children? The 3 children who were made from our love for each other, remember them. They're the best of both of us, Susan. We made them together. Honey, I love you, and our children, but he needs me right now. I promise that tomorrow I'm all yours, she smiled as if that would make it all better. Now was the time to play the part one had been psyching myself down for. Okay, but I don't like this, I shook my head in resignation with a sigh of defeat. The look of triumph that came to her face was quickly replaced by a condescending smile. Don't worry, honey. I love you, and I will always be yours. This is just temporary, she said. Okay, but like I said, it will be a long time coming before I am okay with you doing this, Susan, I shook my head again as she walked towards the garage. This was just temporary until lover boy had been dealt with. Then let her see how much she likes him when I'm done. As soon as she left, I went and grabbed the aluminum baseball bat, my old Bowie knife, and my blowtorch. I grinned evilly as I climbed into the cab of my Ford and turned on the GPS and voice receivers. She had the radio on, and I could hear her humming a happy tune along with the radio. I slipped the torch, knife, and bat into the gym bag. As I gave her a 5-minute head start, I saw by the GPS that she was only a few miles away, so I gunned my truck to life and headed over there. I pulled up to the house where she had just parked her car in his garage. She even had a garage door opener for his place. Jesus, she might as well be married to him instead of me. I felt my rage rising again, but took some deep breaths to keep it in check. I wanted to do nothing more than to bust in there and beat the shit out of him, and her too if she got in the way. At least I got his license plate number and jotted it down quickly. I always carry a pen and small notebook with me, an old habit from my time in Army CID. I also jotted down his address. No, this would take some proper planning. I made sure that my gear was squared away. I got in the back of the cab and changed into my redneck ninja gear, as I came to think of it. I put on the girdle so my gut wasn't showing, pulled on the gloves to get rid of any fingerprints, and the sweater over that. I put on the black jeans and pulled the ski mask over my face. This would just be reckoned tonight, tomorrow would be a different matter, however. I then pulled around to the mouth of the alleyway behind the houses. I stopped a few houses down from lover boys and slipped out quietly. I left the bat inside the cab and went in silently through his alley gate. No problem so far. I kept my eyes open, scanning for any alarm systems. None so far. I went low and ran to the closest window. There was light from inside, and it was damn near pitch black outside. That would give me an advantage too. I stopped just below the window and peeked over the sill. What I saw made my blood boil. The guy was sitting there, stroking himself while my wife gave him a little striptease. I was now damn glad that I hadn't brought the bat with me, as I would have busted in the window and then busted his head open with my impression of Mark McGuire. I took several deep breaths to calm myself. I listened intently for any clues as to who he was. That's it, baby. I love it when you dance for me. You like that, honey? Do you like it when I strip like a little 304 for you? I really had to maintain my self-control now. I was tempted to go back to my truck and get my bed anyway. I love it. You were so hot, Susan, he exclaimed in a tone of voice that said he was having no guilt or hard times to get through. I knew she was lying through her teeth. So are you, Jim, she giggled. Jim, who? Well, Jim, I think very soon you're going to wish you had never even heard of Susan Fremont. I had heard enough. I left before I did anything stupid. I didn't want Susan there when I finally had it out with a hole. I wouldn't physically harm her, but her boy toy, on the other hand, was fair game. So, he had set out to seduce my wife, knowing she was married. He had willfully and knowingly cucked me. He had somehow subverted Susan's iron will. He was dangerous, and I was going to make damn sure he never did it to anyone else's wife. Once I was back in the cab, I got out of the sweater, black jeans, and ski mask with Oakley, and the surprisingly comfortable sports girdle. It made my beer gut disappear. When I put on my normal blue jeans, t-shirt, and boots, I started my truck and hauled out of there. Jim. Okay, now I had a first name, and I could look up his last name in the morning. I walked into my house and decided to get my lockpicks from my nightstand. I had kept them since my time in CID, and somehow I knew they would come in handy someday. I called my mom and asked if she would like for the kids to stay overnight, and she said sure. She missed her grandkids, so I promised to bring them by in the morning for her to watch. I then called Susan's folks to let them know that I would pick up the kids later in the morning. While they loved their grandchildren, they were relieved that I would be picking them up and taking them to my mom's place. I packed a suitcase with some of my clothes and boxes and shoved it in my closet. It was getting close to the endgame now. She was going to realize just how much she had lost within the next 72 hours. I got to bed early and awoke early the next morning. After another morning jog and an actually healthy breakfast today, I got on my old laptop and looked up Jim's address and license plate number. Mr. James Robert Stevens was his name. He was indeed a divorce attorney, and he also really had lost his wife in an accident several years back. Hey, so they weren't lying about that. He had, however, used it to seduce my wife. The scumbag was using his personal tragedy to steal another man's wife, my wife, typical a-hole. The news of his loss actually made me feel even better for what I had planned for his a-holiness. He was going to know true pain, not the pain of loss that he had suffered before, but the pain that comes with the consequences of stealing another man's wife. I went to work as usual, still on my sabbatical, and parked in the parking lot. I then jogged to the bank and picked up my new ATM card and credit cards. Once those were in hand, I pulled $300 out of the ATM and rented a car from the Hertz rental place down the street from the bank. The car I rented was a nondescript sedan, and with my gym bag transferred from the truck to the car, I parked down the street from Loverboy's house. I then used my cell to call Susan. Surprisingly, she picked up after the first ring. "Jonathan, what's going on? Aren't you at work?" "Yeah, just on a short break right now," I lied. "I was wondering how long you were going to let the kids stay at your grandparents' house until Monday." "Why?" she asked. "Well, then you won't mind if my mom watches them for a while. They're her grandkids too, and she misses them," I said it in a reasonable tone. I was getting better and better at hiding my resentment. "Okay, I have no problem with that," she said nonchalantly. The fact that she was giving in that fast was different and worried me a little. "Sounds good. I'll have Mom pick them up shortly," I lied again. "Can I expect some of your loving at home tonight when I get off work?" I asked in a hopeful tone. There was a long silence before she spoke again, and I realized she had muted the cell's microphone. "I guess so. It's only fair, after all." "I told you that I was all yours tonight," she said in her even tone that said she really didn't want to. Well, soon she wouldn't really have a choice. Then her mood and tone lightened somewhat. "Does this mean that you're actually seeing things my way?" I had to swallow my bile before answering with another convincing lie. "Let's just say I'm leaning that way, but I do want equal time with you if that's not too much to ask." "Oh, honey, I'm so happy that you're thinking clearly now," she exclaimed. Oh, she had no idea how clearly I was thinking. "Let's not jump the gun now, baby," I replied, still playing the reluctant participant. "We still need to talk tonight when you get home. But I'm going to want you for the whole weekend. I have something special planned for us." That sounds good, she said, her tone quite a bit lighter now that she thought I was going to go along with her. Well, if you can pull away from him early, I want you showered and douched for me when I get home from work. I'm going to take off a bit early tonight so I can get home to you. I've missed you, baby. I sounded convincing even to myself, and that made me want to hurl. However, the last couple of days of jogging, eating right, and not drinking had helped my stamina quite a bit. I think she would definitely be pleased with me tonight. My beer gut was definitely less than it had been just a few days earlier. Honey, I always shower and douche after I've been with him. I wouldn't disrespect you so much as to make you have sloppy seconds, she laughed, and I knew she was lying about that too. Well, I'm going to go down on you tonight, baby. I want you to taste good and fresh for me, I laughed too. Don't worry, honey, I will, she said. I'll see you tonight. She ended the call, and I put my cell phone back in my pocket. I changed quickly in the back seat of the sedan, and once again, I was the redneck ninja, only without my ski mask and shades on yet. I slumped down in the car to wait. I was parked the opposite direction than she would go to go home, but I couldn't be too careful. Susan isn't stupid, at least as far as that goes. I started the car and pulled into the driveway of the abandoned house a few doors down and across the street from Jim, the AOL's place. I maneuvered the mirror so I could easily see his driveway and garage, and slumped down in the seat to wait. I was prepared to wait for hours if necessary. Susan surprised me when she left after only a few hours. She texted me and said she was leaving now and would be home, clean and fresh, and waiting for me. I smiled grimly, then backed out of the driveway and followed her at a safe distance. I wanted to make damn sure she wasn't lying to me. Sure enough, she pulled into our driveway 10 minutes later, and I just drove on by and back to his place. I parked in the alley behind the houses again and slipped in through his back gate as I had done the previous night. Only this time, I had my bat on me, and it was going to get a workout. I made sure my ski mask and shades were on, and decided that it was indeed time. I looked in his bedroom window, and the lover boy was asleep. I smiled grimly, then tried the back door. It was unlocked, so I didn't even need to pick the lock. What an arrogant a-hole. Fine by me. Now, some of my favorite movies are the Dark Knight trilogy, starring Christian Bale, Michael Caine, and a bunch of other great actors. One of the parts one liked the most was how he would change his voice as Batman. I was planning to do the same. I had my full redneck ninja thing going on now, and when I walked into his bedroom, he was still out like a light. Apparently, he had spent all night having sex with my wife. Well, that was going to end now. I dropped the gym bag, took the bat out, cleared my throat loudly, and he opened his eyes blearily at first. Then he saw the bat in my hands, and he freaked out. I brought the bat down on his knee first, shattering his kneecap. His mobility was now greatly compromised. He screamed, and I brought the bat down again, shattering his other kneecap. His mobility was now nil. I smiled under my mask. I lowered my voice to a growl. How does it feel, lover boy? Jonathan is a friend of mine, and he even told me not to do anything to you if I found out who you were. Unfortunately for you, I have my own sense of justice. I punctuated this with a swing to his balls, and heard bone crack as his pelvis broke. Please don't kill me, he screamed through the pain. I'll do anything you want. I have money, I can pay you, he cried, tears of pain. I don't want your money, I growled back. I want you to never so much as think about Susan Fremont again. If you do, I will return, and you will not be so lucky next time. This time was just a warning. If you report this to the police and Jonathan gets in trouble, I will return, and I will kill you. You've already ruined his marriage. I punctuated that with another swift swing to his balls. From what I'd seen the night before, he wasn't even as well hung as I was. He was in shape though, shape I would be in soon, but by then, he wouldn't be able to compete. I then swung the bat once more, breaking his left arm just below the shoulder. I found his cell phone and bashed it with the bat, then bashed both of his landline telephones. I did not want him to call Susan or anyone else for that matter. I walked out back and slipped out the gate and into the sedan. I changed again, then drove to a quickie mart across town where I dumped the bat. I put gas in the tank and in the trunk of the sedan, then drove out of town a ways and torched the rest of the gym bag. Once that was done, I wiped my fingerprints from the torch and threw it on the fire. It was a shame to burn those Oakley shades since they were pretty expensive, but that was okay. They were well worth the money I'd spent. Then, I went to a divorce attorney of my own and had her draw papers against Susan. I was suing for full custody of the kids and 75% of everything. I would pay her no alimony, nor would I ask her for child support. As long as she played ball, I would not tell her folks the real reason we were getting a divorce. I told my attorney that I would have an admission of her affair recorded very soon. Then, I drove back to the rental place and turned in the car. I thanked him, then jogged back to the diesel shop and went inside. I told my boss that I could work the rest of the shift but needed to leave early to meet Susan. I would still need a few days off coming up, and he was okay with that. Once I was done with the work in the shop, I decided to buy a prepaid cell phone on the way home. I activated it, called 911, and in my growling voice told them what had happened to Mr. James Robert Stevens and gave them his address. I then tossed the phone out the window and into the canal that ran alongside the road. No, I didn't want him to die, I just wanted him to feel the pain I had felt, but for the rest of his days. He had sex with my wife, so I had messed up his life. It was a fair trade, I thought. I pulled the voice recorder out of my pocket and turned it on. The following conversation with my wife is not to be taken at face value on my part. I do not approve of her affair now or ever. I then switched it off and replaced it in my pocket. I pulled into the garage and before going inside, I removed the GPS and voice-activated recorders from Susan's car. I threw them in my truck, and that was that. I went inside and reactivated my pocket recorder before coming up behind Susan and putting my arms around her waist. "That smells good, baby," I said, kissing the side of her neck. She was cooking some steaks on the stove and already had mashed potatoes and green beans made. "Thanks, honey. I am so glad that you're more accepting of the situation now," she said, then turned her face up to kiss my lips. "About that, baby," I said, "would you really have divorced me if I didn't go along with it?" I kept the tone light as if I was over her threats. "I wouldn't want to, but I would have in a heartbeat if you tried to deny me my lover. I'm sorry, honey. I wish it could have been different. I didn't want to threaten you, please believe that. I do love you, you know. Would you really have taken my kids and not let me see them, though? That would be kind of cruel, wouldn't it?" I once again kept my tone light as if I was accepting her demands. Now she sighed. "Yes, I would have. It was at his urging that I make it as painful for you as possible if you wanted a divorce. I'm so sorry, honey. I never meant it to sound like that. Well, at least I have you for the weekend, and Mom has the kids until Monday. I'm taking Monday off if you can find it in your heart to be with me that day too. Okay, but Tuesday night I have to meet him again, and I will be with him until Wednesday morning. Then, I will be home to take care of our children." Wow, what a great mother, not? "I have to ask one more time, is there nothing I can do to get you to stop seeing him?" I asked in a defeated tone. She sighed again and kept her voice soft and condescending. "I'm sorry, honey. I have to see this through. Don't worry, though, I will still make time for you and the kids whenever possible." Oh, hell, this was pure gold for getting her declared as an unfit mother. But tonight, she was mine. My lawyer had said that she would have the papers ready by Monday, and I was going to have her served either here or at the hospital if she found out about Lover Boy before then. All I had to do was make the call on Monday morning. Dinner was fantastic. I would miss her cooking. After dinner, I showered and took her in my arms. I made love to her that night, did her hard and fast. That was something we hadn't done in a very long time. She climaxed over and over thanks to my improved stamina and lack of alcohol. I did her good, I did her deep. She was cross-eyed after some of the most intense climaxes she'd ever had. So, I wasn't good in bed, was I? Well, now I was going to show her just how good I could be. I popped a Viagra, started again, but that wasn't all. I marked her. I gave her several hickeys on her breasts, neck, and down on her stomach and inner thighs too. I was reclaiming her, and she was loving every second of it. It was only after we were done and she went to the bathroom that she screamed in shock at the marks I had left on her. She came storming back into the bedroom where I was laying with a serene smile on my face. How can I possibly see him now? He doesn't want me marked, she shouted, her face an incredulous mask. Well, you're my wife, and I want you marked as mine. If he doesn't like it, that's not my problem, I shrugged. You never said not to, and you sure enjoyed it while I was doing it to you. That actually shut her up. Her face softened as she sat on the bed and took my hand. Jonathan, that was the best we've ever had, and even better than with him, she said. Wow, I knew she wasn't just stroking my ego now. She had climaxed more times in the last 4 hours than she ever had before. I'm sure I could feel the difference from when she used to fake them for my benefit. Okay, so I wasn't that good in bed before, but now I had some motivation to make it as good for her as I could make it. It seemed to have worked. Susan, I just pray it's enough to get you to stop seeing him. I love you and want to spend the rest of my life with you. All I ask is that you try to see my point of view here. You've been with this guy for over a year now, and I just want my wife back, I said, my eyes pleading with her. Here it was, endgame. I had become damn good at hiding my emotions, but had sex with her with anger instead of tenderness, hatred instead of love. But damn it, I deserved an Emmy, a Golden Globe, and an Oscar for putting up with her. Oh, honey, I'm still your wife. I love you so much. Just a few more months, and this thing will have run its course. Then, I will be all yours again, she smiled happily at me. It wasn't condescending like it had been. She had been prepared before, just in case I decided to divorce her. Now she would get blindsided good. The next day, she was like the Susan I had married again. She cooked, cleaned the house, and actually initiated sex with me that night. I told her that I had taken Saturday off and Monday too, so we could be together more. She was actually having fun with me. I admit I was having fun with her too, but now that I had seen her true colors, I wasn't going to be drawn in again by her facade. That night, I renewed the marks I'd made on her Friday night, and she didn't even protest afterward. It wasn't until Monday that they hit the fan. I pleaded with her one last time not to go back to him. Instead, she grabbed her cell phone and took it into the living room. I told her that I was going to pick up the kids, and she said that was fine. I went and picked up my boy and 2 girls from Mom's house, and she thanked me for letting them stay with her. On the way home, we stopped at Burger King and I bought them lunch. They loved it. Sure, it's not McDonald's, but oh well. The food tastes a lot better than Mickey D's. We were just getting ready to leave when my cell phone rang with Susan's ringtone. Hey, babe, miss me already? I said with a chuckle into the phone. I took the kids to BK for some lunch, and we're on the way home now. Jonathan, what is the meaning of this? She screamed. Oh, did I fail to mention that she had been served while I was picking my kids up? Oh, you must have gotten the papers, I said. Sorry, baby, we can talk about it when we get home, okay? We have something to talk about. I ended the call before she could retort and turned my phone off. I pulled into the garage and took the kids inside. They were hanging all over me, and Susan, in spite of the divorce papers, was actually happy to see them. They ran to their mommy and asked her where she had been. She made up the usual lie that she was volunteering a lot, then actually told the truth when she said that we had a special mommy and daddy only weekend. I told them that they should go play in their rooms as mommy and I needed to talk. Once they were out of sight, I took Susan into the basement. Okay, now the kids won't hear us, I said. Susan, I'm going to divorce you. I'm sorry, but I can't take this anymore. I have asked you time and time again not to continue this affair, and now I have your own admission of the affair on tape. I will be sending that tape to my attorney, and she will submit it into evidence. As you could see from the divorce papers, I am suing for full custody, and the fact that you have been neglecting your family will come out at the trial. You also admitted that your lover was more important to you than your children. You will most likely be deemed an unfit mother thanks to your affair with whoever he is. If he's acting as your attorney, I'm pretty sure that he will be disbarred. According to my own attorney, it's a severe breach of ethics for a lawyer to sleep with his or her clients, especially in the case of divorce. She was stunned, her mouth hung open as she struggled to find the words. But I thought you were okay with it now, she exclaimed incredulously. Susan, I realize now that I never knew you. I also realize now that you never knew me. I did everything I could over the years to make you happy. I bought you this house, I bought you your car, I bought you a lot of your jewelry. I spent more than we could really afford, but I made up for it with the overtime. Everything I did was to make your life and our kids' lives better. I'm sorry now that I couldn't do that and show you all the affection and love that I should have. I really did love you, Susan. Unfortunately, your affair killed that love that I had for you. I never said I was okay with it, you know. I gave you one final chance this morning to give him up completely. I begged you to do it. If you had, I wouldn't have had you served this morning. Instead, you called him this morning before I went and picked the kids up. I know you were. I'm sorry for this, Susan. It was true that I was lying through my teeth, but I still shook my head. The fact that I had been planning this all along was something that I obviously did not want her to know. In the divorce decree, I offered her generous visitation with the children, which could take place either under my supervision or under the supervision of either my mother or my grandfather. I had to break the news to my mother and my grandfather that the divorce was going to take place, which was a challenging task. The first thing I did was call my mother and inform her that I would be leaving and that I had filed for divorce between Susan and myself. In addition to providing her with an explanation of the entire situation, I informed her that I had recorded her confession of having an affair and how she prioritized her lover over her husband and children. Every day, while I was at work, my mother came to an agreement to watch my children. I gathered the children together with Susan, and I explained to them that although Mommy and I would no longer be living together, we would continue to be there for them in any way that we could. I informed them that we would be moving in with Grandma, and they expressed their positive reaction to the news. Due to the fact that Dad had passed away, Mom had a few rooms at her house, and we were going to be staying there with her. I told Susan that she would always be welcome at Mom's house with us as long as she did not bring her boyfriend with her. We were able to pack up fairly quickly, and I told her that she would always be welcome there. She appeared to be completely and utterly defeated. She didn't find out that old Jimmy boy was in the hospital until 2 days after she had made the discovery. The phone rang, and I was already back at work. "Hey, Susan, what's up?" I inquired about it. It was her voice that screamed into my ear, "You son of a dash, you nearly killed him." "Whoa there, what are you talking about?" I retorted in vogue. "It's true that my performance was worthy of multiple awards, just so you know, I had the ability to confuse people." She yelled out, "Who, you," loudly. "You came dangerously close to killing Jim. One thing is certain, he will never be the same again." Currently, she was crying. "Who's Jim?" I inquired in a composed manner. "Jim could not possibly be here if he is so close to passing away. The only thing that has a chance of killing Jim in this situation is a heart attack." I gave Jim a grin, and he couldn't contain his laughter any longer and ran into the office. "Well," she said to herself, "he said he was attacked, but he didn't know who did it." During the pauses in her sobbing, Susan admitted, "He had his balls crushed." "Oh my God," I said in an honest manner. "In the event that he was the individual who took you away from me, then I am unable to express my regret at hearing that, Susan. To tell you the truth, I had nothing to do with what happened to him, but I would love to buy a beer to whoever was responsible for it. Have you ever entertained the idea that he might also seduce the wife of another person? You are aware that you are unable to spend all of your time with him. The groundwork for uncertainty had been laid." I cracked a grin. I was the one who interrupted her as she began to ask, "You don't think he would?" "Why not?" I inquired about it. You admitted to yourself that the death of his wife drove you to a state of depression. That was the means by which he enticed you, Susan. No, it wasn't. She paused, took a moment to reflect, and then continued. As she reflected on everything that had transpired during their affair, she took some time to do so. She screamed out in shock, "Oh my God, you are absolutely correct." It was through Susan's voice that the heavenly chorus proclaimed that I was correct. Even though she had never acknowledged that I was correct, she had finally done so. "Susan, mark this day on the calendar for me, the day you actually admitted that I was right about something," I exclaimed with loud laughter. Certainly, she did not appreciate that. In spite of the fact that she did not approve of the divorce, she did not contest my decision to end the marriage. The judge took into consideration everything, including the pattern of behavior that Susan had been exhibiting over the course of the previous year, which indicated that she had been having an affair with Jim Stevens. Mom testified that she was able to provide babysitting services for my children while I was doing my job. Despite the fact that she had left the children in the care of responsible adults, she had done so in order to carry out her affair within the shadows. My role as primary custodian was established by the judge, who did not go so far as to declare her unfit. His declaration of Susan's status as secondary was contingent upon the condition that she refrain from bringing her lovers in the presence of the children. Even though I wasn't overly thrilled with that, I was content with it. Susan was a wonderful mother. That is, before she started a relationship with Jim. She would now have the opportunity to restore her status as a wonderful mother. I was then informed by the judge that the only amount of child support that I would be required to pay would be for the time that they spent with Susan. It was mandated that Susan find employment. She had majored in accounting while she was in college, which makes it easier for her to find work. We shared the proceeds equally after the house was sold. I had absconded with the joint accounts at the beginning, and the accounts were split 75/25 in my favor during the process. Yes, when Susan attempted to lodge a complaint, the judge looked at her and asked, "Mrs. Fremont, do I need to remind you that you came dangerously close to losing custody of all of your children due to your own selfishness? Get a job right away." The judge who presided over my lawsuit against James Robert Stevens for alienation of affection was in charge of the case. I was surprised to find out that I was awarded $500,000 as part of the settlement, which was based on Susan's confession and testimony. He actually took it seriously. To be honest, I liked that judge. I took my attorney, Angie, out for drinks at the Silver Spar after the final gavel clattered, and we were officially divorced. As a result of her efforts, I was 0.5 millimeter richer than I had been before. Despite the fact that I had continued to exercise and eat healthily and had eliminated almost all alcohol from my life, I wanted to have at least 1 or 2 beers on this particular evening. My Pony Keg Bureau had returned to its previous level of a 6-pack, apps. During all of this chaos, I had, in fact, managed to get back into shape. I knew that I would have to be present for my children, and that I would have to go back to looking for work. Basically, all I did was pray and hope that I would be able to find someone who was not as shallow and self-centered as Susan. There is no denying the beauty of Angela Johnson. The appearance of her dark chocolate skin was scrumptious. The last time I had sexual relations with Susan was right before I surprised her with the divorce papers. It had been almost 7 months since our last encounter. Angie and I had developed a solid relationship during that period of time. Our relationship had evolved beyond that of attorney and client. We had become friends. Consequently, we went to the bar as a group of friends to have a couple of beers. "So, what are your plans now, Jonathan?" During the time that we were drinking our beers, Angie inquired. "You need to get back to work and do everything you can to raise my children. I discovered a house that was more compact, with only 1 story and 4 single bedrooms. The monster that Susan forced me to purchase about 3 years ago is a lot more expensive than this one," I shrugged. "Have you all moved in yet?" she inquired. "Are you?" It's true that we moved in a couple of weeks ago and completed the closing on the house. The kids are in love with it, and it's closer to where I work, I smiled. "You, on the other hand? Even though you were aware that I could potentially lose a lot of money, you still took on my case." "I am grateful for that," I said to her as we clinked bottles. When she saw the look of surprise on my face, she must have noticed that I was saying, "Well, I've been divorced for about 4 years now, ever since my ex got caught cheating on me." "Han, what gives you the impression that I accepted your case with such a significant discount?" Laughing, I said, "I don't like people who cheat." "Good, because neither do I thought to myself as I smiled broadly at her. "Since we're paid up, do you mind if I fire you as a client?" she inquired with a grin on her face. I was taken aback by her investigation. I questioned, "Why?" "Because I don't date clients," she shrugged, her smile growing wider before she continued. I smiled in response. "All right, it looks like I've been fired. Is it possible for you to join me for dinner?" "No, I want you to come to my place so I can cook you something," she stated in response. Now that we've been dating for half a year, I can honestly say that I've never been happier. Angie is not a high-maintenance divorce attorney, especially when compared to Susan, who is a strong and influential divorce attorney. Not only does she love me, but she also loves my children. The children call Angie a mommy, even though Susan is still their mother, which is something that we find to be very endearing. She is very affectionate toward the children. We now have Angie living with us, and Susan comes over to join us for dinner on some of the evenings when she is taking the children away for the weekend. The two of us, Angie and I, get into bed together and then engage in sexual activity with each other. This is a wonderful life. To this day, as far as the a-hole is concerned, he has never recovered from the damage that I caused to him. As a result of the fact that all of the money from his wife's insurance policy was used to pay his medical bills, court fees, and my lawsuit for alienation of affection, he was left without any money and by himself. It is a relief to see him go. In light of the fact that Susan's hormones were completely out of whack, it would appear that she is doing much better now, at least according to her physician. As a result of taking supplements, she appears to be functioning on a much more even keel at this point. While she is employed at an accounting firm in our town, she is able to maintain a steady job and earn a respectable income. As a result of my promotion to supervisor of the diesel shop, I am now earning the same amount of money for 40 hours as I did for 60 hours. The new woman in my life and I now have a lot of time to spend together, and I can spend that time with my children. The fact that Susan will have to live with the consequences of her actions is something that I am willing to accept. I'm not even going to make an effort to comfort her because she is now blaming herself for everything that has happened. In light of the fact that she claims she is still in love with me, she does not even date. It doesn't matter. A portion of me wishes that she would suffocate on those regrets because she will carry them with her for the rest of her life. Do I still bear a trace of resentment? Indeed, I am obligated to confess that I am. My ex-boyfriend has put me through a lot, but fortunately, Angie is here to help me forget about it. At this point in time, life is pretty damn good. Listeners, I would appreciate it if you could share your thoughts in the comments section below. Additionally, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel.